Before we get into the show, we want to ask you, our listeners, and the SharePoint community to help us make the InterZone the best podcast it can be. The episodes you've listened to are derived by Chris and myself coming up with what we think are good topics to discuss. The point of the show, however, is to provide insights, answers, and knowledge to our customers and partners. And in order to best plan for upcoming episodes of the InterZone, we've created a brief survey for you to fill out. We promise it's nothing overwhelming or too time-consuming. The survey is for you to tell us what you'd like to hear. Take the survey, go to aka.ms/intrazone survey. Let us know what you think. We will read everything submitted, and we'll do our best to shape the show in the way that you want it to be. Welcome to the InterZone, a show about the SharePoint Intelligent Intranet. I'm Mark Cashman here with my co-host, who is probably still on fire from the amazing things that happened during something called the World Series, Chris McNulty.
Well, thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Have you rested at all since the ginormous win of your beloved Red Sox?
Yes, I did. You know, it's funny. We recorded a podcast during the series, and we talked about by the time you hear the next one, it may or may not be running. One of the games, Game 3, was just an exercise in persistence because the game was nearly 8 hours long.
Are you sure it's not still going? I think that Game 3 is actually still being played right now.
Well, I still think somewhere episode 1 of our podcast is still playing somewhere.
That's possible. So besides the Red Sox, you can't bring up baseball in this one quite as much, even though we just did it. Who are we joined by? You did a little bit of legwork on this podcast.
Sure. Well, we're going to be talking this week with Lori Gowin, who's a technical solution professional for Microsoft down in Huntsville, Alabama. And I also returned to my old stomping grounds last month to talk to Chris Bortlik and Paul Summers at the Microsoft Technology Center and several of our partners at SharePoint Saturday New England.
Nice. So Chris on the street, Chris on his home turf. So that'll be really awesome to hear from those people and obviously how you teed them up and shared your thoughts and got their thoughts. So a lot of what we focus on in this episode, we want to drill into what it means to work with Microsoft, you know, as a trusted advisor, as a partner, as somebody who is selling and obviously answering questions. We play a lot of different roles throughout the whole sales life cycle. And of course, just advocacy of doing the right thing when working with a technology company like ours. So we really want to be clear on what is it like to work with Microsoft. So we want to spend a little bit of time here talking about the different roles that you may come across, including Chris and I and the team that we work on, which is marketing. But beyond that, not just that you're being marketed to or sold to, but really get into that trusted advisorship.
You know, it's interesting. You and I were talking about this, and I think, you know, until a few years ago, the 3-year cycle that Microsoft shipped in definitely meant different things for a customer. There were entire workplace optimization programs around the idea that you would have a selection phase and then an implementation phase and then a running steady state phase and then an optimize phase, and 3 years later it would be time to buy or upgrade something else. So at each of those phases, you would be talking to different people in Microsoft. You'd be talking to sales up front, and then someone in a pre-sales role. Then you'd get into possibly a partner to help you implement, and then support teams, and then hopefully at some point no one. But that's not the way that we ship software, and that's not the way I think our customers consume software. And at the same time, as a company, we've pivoted to focusing less on revenue. Although to our stockholders out there, we care about revenue. I want to be clear about that. But I'm really focusing on usage because usage is the best indicator of making sure that we are doing the right things to connect with our customers. It may have been Kevin Turner who actually said, who's Microsoft's former COO, like, get the usage and the revenue will follow. But that's Microsoft's corporate imperative. I do think it means that with the sales team that's now focused on usage and not classic sales, you have pre-sales people and support people and partners all coming possibly within the same week to talk to a customer or having the customer come into a Microsoft office like a Microsoft Technology Center or any of our offices around the world. So it's all happening intermingled, and it's chaotic and lovely and dynamic and messy all at the same time.
And that's part of what we want to walk through here just a little bit is who are those different people from Microsoft that you're interacting with? And of course, we extend that through partners in a significant way. The first one that I certainly in my role, and I think you now in your role, have focused on the most with, which is our core audience. We call them the technology solution professional, and also their peer, which is the solution specialist. So somebody who thinks about the art of the possible and then really shows you how you can deliver that. From our terms, they are the specialist team unit. They come together, usually talk early tech, but then also are now being more fluent in carrying through.
We should have a chime, like a ding, anytime there's a 3-letter acronym.
Okay, well, this is our first
STU.
one. The STU. Wait for the sound. Oh, that was nice.
Yeah.
So the specialist team unit, our people are going to come in and demo to you the art of the possible. They're going to hear what you're trying to accomplish and give you that early feedback. That's right. Already been cached, I think is what it is.
They will, in many cases, but not all cases, but have to go to someone in the product team or to one of our internal communities if you have a very specific support question, like what's the proper ordering of the command line parameters for this PowerShell command? If they know it, great. And they're more likely to know it than a lot of other folks in the ecosystem, but it's...
Yep, they'll be usually the ones that you want to call, and this would be my advice to customer, is to ensure that you're meeting regularly with your SSP or TSP or through the STU, ensuring that you're seeing the latest, getting a sense of what you have and where you might go next. They're also going to be up to date on our latest announcements with the ability to then show you in person how to do things.
It's part and parcel with that role to get comfortable with our roadmaps. And, in some ways, I was talking to Jason Bullock, one of our favorite TSPs based in Chicago, where we'll be going soon. He's moved to a different role within Microsoft, but the TSPs are in a position to be able to look left to right across all of modern workplace, all of, in many ways, Microsoft 365. So I find sometimes they're a better resource for telling me what's happening with Windows Desktop, or, do you know about this part of the Excel roadmap? Because the SharePoint universe is broad, but it's not that broad.
Are you ready for the next TLA?
As long as it's not an ETLA. I'll get back to that in a second.
So there is the ATU, which is the account team unit. And these are the folks that are going to be a little bit more closer to signing on the dotted line, obviously bringing a lot of people together from relationship, and any of escalations usually come through the account manager. So the account manager is the biggest role within the ATU.
The AE.
And the AE, of course, on the services side.
Yes.
So whether it is starting with that you have an issue that you want to have addressed, or it is just something where you're wanting to talk licensing costs, driving costs down, or just looking how you can augment and maybe move into that next cycle of your enterprise agreement or other licensing property. But the ATU is pretty critical because they have kind of the most clout to be able to bring people together on that very proactive measure, or at those times reactive as well. But any take on what people should think about when they either reach out to their account manager or an AE?
Whereas with the specialist teams, you should ask them questions. With your ATU, you should tell them things. Because one of the best things that we have coming from our role is that those account teams, they're the voice of the customer. And I find myself, when I have to talk to someone from an ATU, saying, what's really going on there? What are they trying to accomplish? Why now? Why are these issues coming up? And the best ones just can completely answer naturally in the voice of the customer. There's been a leadership change. They've purchased a subsidiary, so then now they're subject to GDPR. Being able to put the questions in context so that we know the best ways to kind of coach them through whatever they're looking to accomplish.
So the last TLA is the PTU, the Partner Team Unit. And this is something where we have a role within Microsoft called the Partner Account Manager. And then there's also, of course, all of our partners. And, we certainly quote numbers as there's a lot of partners out there.
So the old acronym for that role was PAM, but it no longer is the case. The PTU is based of now the PDM, the Partner Development Manager, and the PTA, Partner Technical Advisor. They're in an interesting role because they are trying to coach the partners in building the partners business. But because many partners have a scaled up voice of lots and lots of customers, those partner advocates can also be someone. If you're a customer, you should be aware, and you're working with a partner, that the partner also has other resources that they can tap into outside of the customer-facing roles.
I think one of the biggest advantages of plugging in and leveraging the PTU is if you ever ask yourself, does Microsoft offer this out of the box? If the answer is no, that almost never means that it doesn't exist in some form. And it may be a solution that you leverage for a year to 3 years. And if we ever do it out of the box, a really good partner is aware of what our roadmap is. They're building in a way where they augment, but always ahead of us, never behind us. And so through the PTU, you can discover where are solutions that exist that maybe augment what Microsoft offers out of the box in a smart way so that they're not only a good partner, but that you can actually accomplish what you're looking to do at the time that you're looking to do it.
And across the Microsoft ecosystem, there's partners large and small who may be plugged into a specialty piece of the technology or all of M365 or everything Microsoft has to offer. And our PTUs offer skills out to those partners. They can support basically development coaching. They offer training programs. And there are some specialty programs within all of those. There's 2 programs that we have within the SharePoint universe for business apps as part of M365 and for ECM content services. And those are places where we've identified partners who've proven that they've been successful with customers. And we give them special training, the opportunity to come to campus once a year to ask questions of us, to compare notes on what customers are telling us. We just held one of those summit meetings last Monday. So it's as a customer, understand that your partner also has resources that they can tap into to help you get wherever you need to go.
Yep. And we actually have a new preview program that we're just starting through our fast track motion. It's all around the concept of people wanting to build their intranet on SharePoint in Office 365. And so in concert with our engineering team, working with an early set of partners, similar to how you've built out your partner program, starting to just take that early planning, migration, onboarding, but have that be something that we scale through partners because they can be more regionally focused, they can be focused and dedicated, and I imagine the same for how you've scaled your program. So throughout the sales cycle, Microsoft, in all of these roles that we've been talking about, come and go. And that could be proactive, reactive, based on request, or showing up because we're wanting to promote something that is new and being proactive. But there's a number of different touch points, in the sales cycle. There's pre-sales. That's pretty straightforward. If you don't have something, we'd love for you to at least be aware of it and then consider it. As you onboard, you should know there's a ton of resources to help you plan, to help you execute, to help you onboard. Beyond onboarding, which a lot of people think is the end, that's where Microsoft is going to wave their hand and say goodbye. There's a lot of people that are gold on you being happy. The difference that you mentioned earlier around product cycles and services cycles. Right. The biggest difference there is we want you to be a happy customer every day, every week, every month. So to really focus on people using and adopting and being aware of the art of the possible, and then going and doing it, we want that.
The Fast Track program at Microsoft encompasses all 3 of those. So a productivity library to help you understand what's possible. They offer onboarding, guidance, assistant templates, and resources, as well as adoption guides, which sort of gets them into another TLA, which is the CSM.
Ah, yes. The CSM, the Customer Success Manager, I believe is the best, strongest role that we've added to the lineup. So the impetus of the CSM actually came with when we acquired Yammer. They were doing business where they wanted people to use and adopt their technology,
right,
and to then scale that across all of Office 365 and essentially train up a lot of CSMs to go into different products and scenarios. And it starts to bleed into from CSM to somebody that we've talked to before, and are also we had the pleasure of talking with Lori later in the episode, the PFE, somebody who is more on the support side. But the support used to be, call us when you've got a problem. Now support is actually very reactive. Let us show you in the context of a longer workshop or a couple of hours on the call to show you how to do something or to show you how to get yourself out of trouble.
Right.
So that support and troubleshooting role, commonly for us through the PFE, the Premier Field Engineer, is a huge importance, especially when it really does get into that something's wrong and it needs to be fixed.
The PFE is still typically there for the IT group to support technical implementations. But the CSMs, or if you're not familiar with them, try to find out where they are in the account for you, because the best CSMs are really focused on users and people and being able to give quick coaching tips and, one-page guides to, did you know there's a really easy way to make sure that your entire team has access to a meeting recording, which is not to set it up autonomously, but to set it up inside of the channel that the team is using, and that way the recording will be dropped right to the SharePoint site and everyone will get a notice and it automatically all those kinds of tips. They have lots of those sheets and guides really to focus on things. You may not have known you could do this, but you can.
So I have a softball question, but it might be a hard one for you.
Okay.
And I think this will kind of wrap up the different roles. Marketing. What is the role of marketing in this context of how customers, even partners, should think about working with Microsoft?
So the role of the marketing org, there's two sides of it. There's an inbound side and there's an outbound side. The inbound side for us is to listen to the market, which means listening to customers, but also trends and analysts and things, and being able to take some of that goodness and translate that into a filtered set of feedback across our product teams based on what we see as the responses that customers have to our products. And then on the flip side of that, the outbound side, is to take all of that goodness that our partners in the engineering teams build and communicate that out back to our customers into the world in a way that makes them aware and excited and introduces them to innovation. It's a real educational function in that regard.
Yeah, I think it's that translating from what was sort of early developed code with the intent of solving a certain problem and always landing it in context of what is it, how do I use it, and always the one question, when's it going to be available to me?
Right.
So roadmap is pretty huge, and we've invested a lot in the Microsoft 365 roadmap purely to answer the sort of low-hanging, what is it and when is it coming? But to build off of that, there's a lot of listening and then a lot of talking back and making it consumable. So when you're working with Microsoft, say in Birmingham, Alabama, you might come across a wonderful woman whose name is Lori Gowin. Lori is here with us today. She is a technical solutions professional, and fairly recently was also a great role in the field, which is a premier field engineer. So you might hear us say a couple acronyms, TSP for the technology solutions professional or technical solutions professional, and PFE for premier field engineer. But let us welcome Lori. Lori, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
What's behind Lori? What makes you tick in your role and what you do out there? And again, if you can share a little bit about what you were as a PFE and what you were as a TSP. Tell us a little bit more.
Sure. So I've always been a little bit of a technophile and just kind of loved things. And many, many years ago, somebody threw this thing at me and said, hey, you're the messaging and collaboration system. This thing called SharePoint says it's collaboration. Can you figure this out? And of course, I dove right in and loved it. And that led me down a career path where I did more and more of that type of work, ended up being an independent consultant. And then a friend of mine who also works for Microsoft said, you'd be a great PFE. And I said, what's that? Mm-hmm. And he said, well, it's basically the stuff you're doing, only you get to work for Microsoft. And I said, am I Microsoft material? I don't know that I'm Microsoft material. And a lot of back and forth conversation. And he said, I think you should apply. And I said, okay, here's my resume. Let's see what happens. And ended up as a SharePoint PFE, which was so much fun. And I did that for a little over 6 years. And I got to work with all kinds of customers across a lot of different industries, helping them figure out how SharePoint could work for them, the things that it could do, helping them support their implementations, migrations, upgrades, the whole 9 yards. And really, it's been such a fun thing. I wasn't sure that I wanted to leave, but I kind of felt like it was time for whatever was next, because my managers kept saying, "Hey, what's next?" And I was like, I guess I should think about that. And so I started thinking about what would be next for me. And I love technology, so I kind of wanted to stay on the technical side, and just kind of see what happened. And I heard about this role called TSP a couple years ago, and I started talking to people that were in the role, that were doing it. And it is more on the sales side, so less support, more helping people think outside the box, how technology can work for them and what it can do. So I started kind of thinking about it, talking to people that were in the role, listening to what they were doing, maybe shadowing a little bit. Something that I like to do is go watch people work, figure out how they actually do things. Do you learn a little bit more about what the role is? And about a year ago, actually, in November, I found out about a role that was opening up. They were doing some new things in the TSP role where you were supporting specific industries. And one of my friends said, "I think you'd be great at this. Why don't you give it a shot?" And so I talked with their manager, and they said, "Well, the collaboration piece we've already got covered, but we do need somebody really for this thing called Power BI." And I said, "Well, I've heard of Power BI. I can probably do that." And so I started cramming and learning Power BI, and started talking with the manager, and finally was able to find the role, and started that in January and have loved it. It's been a lot of fun learning a new technology. I still get to do a lot of SharePoint stuff because the collaboration TSPs on my team have found out that I know a lot of SharePoint stuff. So they call me.
Yep.
And I get to do their role and mine, and I'm like hoping that that'll, somehow work itself out. But it's a lot of fun getting to do that. The difference now is customers are just trying to figure out how they're going to use the tools. So I get to really come in and help them brainstorm and think creatively outside the box of, they have this problem of we need to get information to our users. How are we going to do it? And I get to help them figure out how to do that and what's going to work best for them.
So let's take you back a little bit. So
Okay.
Let's go back to kind of what the role of the PFE is. Because one thing that we really want to make sure our audience knows is all the different skills that are out there close to where customers live and work that are available to them. So as a PFE, you're principally engaged with customers after they've already started using our technology or we're in the process of adoption. Help explain that for us.
That's true. So PFE is Premier Field Engineer. Part of Premier Services is that support piece. So you get somebody that's dedicated to you, plus you get that, hey, I've got a problem, I need to call somebody fast. But you can get a Premier Field Engineer that will come in and help you either implement or support what you've already got.
So PFEs are basically the technical equivalent of folks who, already have the pack on the back, parachute ready to drop in wherever they're needed.
That's correct.
Yeah, I've sometimes heard it where there's the bloop button that they push, or
yeah.
But I think sometimes also very proactive that they bring you in to showcase, workshops and some deeper technology how-tos and, longer than just an hour, half-day, multi-day type workshops.
And so as a PFE, are you principally engaged with a small handful of customers, or you might potentially get dropped in anywhere you're needed?
So a little bit of both. When I started out, there's two flavors of PFE. There's transactional PFE and then dedicated. And I started out as transactional. And what transactional is you go wherever you're needed for whatever you're needed for. It could be problem resolution. It could be training and teaching. It could be a project they're working on and you're helping them figure it out. It could be evaluating a system that's in place and telling them, a risk assessment basically for them. So it could be any number of things. And those are usually 3 to 5 day engagements. So potentially a lot of travel. We do try to do as much remotely as possible now. But when I first started, there was not as much. So I was gone a lot. But then you get some repeat customers sometimes that they say, hey, that person really helped us a lot. They want us to come back. And then they start saying, can we just have that person? And then you become dedicated. So I moved from one role to the other and really got dedicated on a handful of customers. So I had about 4 or 5 customers that I got to go really deep with. And then you're doing the assessments, the training, but you're also doing strategy. How are we going to get from where we are now to where we want to be, helping them plan big things. One of my customers was doing a physical to virtual migration, wanted to know the impact of all that, how they were going to do it. We took 12 server farms and consolidated them down to 10 virtual farms. So it was a pretty big project.
So as a PFE, so you're definitely on the front lines of really helping customers apply our technology. How do you interact with the rest of Microsoft? I mean, I think we know that, but help our audience understand, what you get to tap into throughout the Microsoft internal ecosystem.
So there's a lot of things that you get to do. There's a lot of internal training that happens, a lot of internal training for things that are coming, which is really good, so that we're ahead of the curve. So our customers start asking questions, hey, when's the next version coming? What's going to happen with this? We kind of get a little bit of insight into that, and we can start planning ahead for what our customers are going to be asking. And then, we also have the ability to tap into things like, the product team and stuff like that to ask those questions. Why can't we do XYZ? Or we've got a really big problem with this. How can we fix it? And having that pipeline of being able to work back and forth with support with the product group and driving the direction of the product. Because, some of the customers, they have some really big implementations, and some of the things that they need, we really have to work closely with the product team to say, okay, these are the things that our customers are doing. How can we help them with this in the product?
So I am curious,
really cool.
Before we kind of expand and look forward into what it means to be a TSP, what's the most interesting place that your role as a PFE has taken you?
So interesting as in distance or interesting as in cool technology?
However you want to interpret that.
All right. So I would say probably the most interesting technical thing that I've gotten to do would be that big project of migration from physical machines to virtual machines, helping them do impact on it, planning the capacities and things like that, because we had to do a lot of testing for load on that, because there is some differences when you're working with actual physical machines versus virtual machines, and you have that host server in there and all of that. So really getting to do that, we got to really dive deep into a lot of technology there. So that was really fun. But I'd say the most interesting place that I got to go physically was I got to go to Vancouver, British Columbia, which was kind of cool. It's not often that we get to go outside of our physical countries, but I had a scarce skill. I'm going to use a really dirty word here called infopath.
I'm sorry. What? I'm not familiar with that. What is that?
That's Canadian. That's Canadian for Power App, eh?
Yeah.
Right.
Power App A, indeed.
And of course, this was a few years ago, but they needed somebody with those skills. And so I got to go do some projects with a company there in British Columbia, because they just didn't have anybody that was available that had that skill.
Wow.
That was pretty cool.
That's a fun reason to travel to Canada. I'm going to see if I can just sneak up to the border and say, I know a little bit about InfoPath. Will you let me in now? So
right.
We want to switch your hats. I'm imagining as a PFE, maybe you would wear a hard hat, like you're going in, doing a little construction, helping out and supporting. But in the role of the technical solution professional, maybe you're wearing a little bit more of a beret, maybe something a little bit fancier for pre-sales. But tell us, in that role of the PSE, as a TSP, is there a recent instance that you can share that really helps people understand in that particular role what it's like to work with Microsoft?
Sure. I would like to change the hat, though, to like a wizard hat.
It's your hat. You choose the hat.
Glitter and spangles and all that.
Yeah, and I get the magic wand. So I got a really cool experience recently. I went to a customer, and they were trying to figure out what their future was going to be. I had to work with a couple other specific roles. With my particular role, the Power BI TSP, I really focused just on Power BI. It's a very front-end type tool. There's a lot of back-end stuff that goes into it. So I do work very closely with some other TSPs that are working with data and AI and things like that. And they would come in and help them plan out the entire ecosystem. How are we getting our data, and then what are we going to do with it? So they kind of start with how are we getting it, where are we storing it, and then I come in and kind of say, okay, here's some cool things we can do with this. And so we work very closely together. We had a customer that said, hey, we've got all this data, and let's just face it, everybody has data. They start keeping data from day one on anything. And they said, we've got to figure out how we can take this data and make it presentable to our customers and to our current users so that they can make some decisions. And being able to go in with the other team and say, okay, here's how we're going to store it, because they were like, okay, how are we going to keep all this stuff? We're running out of room. Where are we going to put things? What's the best way for us to do this? And then now we need to know how we're going to use it. And so really being able to come in and do that very quick, sit down with them and show them how quick and easy they can start working with Power BI. They had about 12 people in the room. None of them had ever touched anything BI at all. We had a SharePoint guy in the room. We had a guy in the room that was a finance guy, and all he'd ever worked with was Excel. We had some people in the room that were there from the business analyst side, and they all said, we've never heard of Power BI. What are we going to do? And I had them open up Power BI, and I just kind of went through kind of a mini, what we call a dashboard in a day, where we can sit down and give them some data they can play with and build out a dashboard very quickly, connecting to data and showing them how quickly. And all of them were like, I could do so much with this. And I love seeing those lights go off. So that's my favorite part of being a TSP, is seeing them think, oh, I can do this with that.
And you just are waving your wand, loading up a SharePoint page with a beautiful Power BI web part.
A data wand, if it will. A power. It's let's be fair. Going back to the way we were naming products a few years ago, it's got to be a power wand. Power Pivot.
It has to be a power wand.
We had Power Pivot, Power BI, Power Apps,
Power Lori.
Right there we go.
Yeah, I like that.
So I want to also break down something, because you described that the TSP role is a little more sales oriented, or some people might even call it a pre-sales role.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're there to try to sell someone something. Many times you're dealing with technologies that the customer already owns but may not have implemented.
Right. That's correct. A lot of times they're just trying to figure out, okay, what have we got and how can we use it? And so the TSP role is coming in and helping understand how it works, how you can use it, overcoming technical challenges, because you may have a department like security that says, oh, we're a little afraid of that. What's it going to do? And so you have to, hey, we've got this particular need. We got to make sure it meets that. And you have to help them make sure that it meets those particular needs and requirements. So it's overcoming those technical challenges as well as figuring out how to use it, or even if they just want to use it and how it would be. So there's a little bit of all of that involved, and it's
right.
It's a very fulfilling role, because I love the light bulb moments. That's what I call them, when the light bulb goes off and go, oh, I can do this. So there's a lot of that in there, getting able to see people inspired on how they can start using stuff. Just this week, in fact, I've got a customer that I was with earlier in the week. They have Power BI, but haven't started implementing it yet, and they're trying to figure out how. And so was able to sit down, show them a couple of quick things in Power BI, and they said, hey, let's do this. You can just stop right now. I want to start using this for one of my reporting things that I have to do. Can you come sit with me and show me how I can build this dashboard? And so that's what we're going to do, is show them how they can build that dashboard, and then they can start using it.
Sounds like you might be defining a new TSP role. There's that I can't remember the first term, where the TSP just kind of comes and goes. You're going to be a dedicated TSP, because people are like, people know Lori can make it happen.
So in terms of where you're dedicated, I'm curious. So what do you cover? Do you cover a couple of accounts? Do you cover a region? Do you cover an industry, or all of the above?
A little bit of region and industry. So I'm in financial services industry. So think banking, insurance, that type of stuff. So we've really focused on an industry in the role because there are some industries that are very highly regulated. You've got financial services, healthcare, government work, things like that. That are very regulated industries. And so we want to be able to focus not just on the technology, but also on the industry and, understanding the regulations that they're having to go through and how we can work within those, maybe their requirements that they have. So I focus on both of those things. And then I'm also focused on the East region. So there's 4 financial services TSPs in the U.S., and we cover the 4 regions. I have about 207 customers roughly. So it's a big shift from seeing maybe a different customer a week. So maybe 30 to 40 different customers in a year when I was transactional to 4 or 5 customers that I was always working with when I was dedicated as a PFE. Now I have 207 customers. And so it's a lot of figuring out how I'm going to interact, what the schedule is going to be like with them. Granted, they're not all at once because they aren't all using the same technology at the same time, right? So it is cyclical. You do get some ebb and flow with different customers. Suddenly there'll be a bunch of projects with one particular customer, and they want you to come in and talk to different groups so that they understand what Power BI is. Maybe they've just purchased it, things like that. So there's a lot of ebb and flow. But I have a lot more to think about and trying to remember not just that I have 207 customers, but all of those may have different divisions and who I'm working with in those divisions. So there's a lot of that around it, but it's a lot of fun getting to see different customers than I used to see, but also being able to specialize for them, understanding their unique needs as being in the financial services industry.
It sounds to me like you've got a lot of data. And it sounds to me with 207 customers, there may be a lot of things to track. I have to ask you, by nature of what you're doing now, do you use Power BI to do all this tracking of data?
All the time. So that is one of the things that we do talk to people about, because they always ask, well, what does Microsoft do? We use Power BI. In the past couple of years, the shift for our entire sales department, I mean, everybody in sales has shifted from trying to manage things in spreadsheets and stuff to using Power BI. And we've built a lot of reports and applications that have Power BI dashboards and reports in them so that you can really drill down into the data points and know who your customers are, what their dates are, the things around them. So I absolutely use Power BI on a regular basis.
Very cool. I didn't doubt it for a second, but I had to ask because you said data, then you said 207, and then you said a whole bunch of other stuff that I lost track of, and I hope that there was some Power BI behind it. One of the things that we've been wanting to ask you, and it's really on behalf of customers, it started off as a curiosity that we wanted to get from you, but it's kind of a broader question. What is the advice that you would give future customers, as they start to engage with Microsoft, with you, with your account team, but also just think in general? What is it that you would tell them in how they can get the most out of Microsoft and what we offer?
I would say get to know all of your account team. The thing that I've learned going from PFE into sales is not only do you have a team when you're working with Premier Services, but you also have a full team that you can access from the sales side. And the two of those can work together if you know who they are. So many times I've gone to customers as one role or the other, and they didn't know who their TAM was, so they couldn't figure out how to get support if they needed actual support. A lot of times they'll reach out to me as a TSP and say, hey, we're having this problem. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll ask you a couple of questions if it's something that I can fix. But if it's an actual problem that you need to open a case for and have some resolution, if it's not just here's how you do that, then you need to know who your account team is, know who your TAM is, be able to open those cases. And then the other goes the same as well. A lot of times when I was a PFE, I was working with just the technical people because that's mostly who you worked with because you're doing support, you're working with them on their systems, helping them maintain, helping them support. But if it came to something new, they might not even know that they had Office 365 or Power BI or something like that, because some business side has said, we're going to buy some Power BI licenses and we're going to start working with it. And they didn't even know. And so they didn't have that interaction with their account team as well to know, hey, our customers our customers, being the people that they support, want XYZ, and they're getting XYZ, but we don't even know it's there. So I found that across a lot of different places, both as a PFE and now as TSP, that one side of the business doesn't necessarily know what the other side is doing because they don't even know the whole account team. They haven't talked to both sides to really know what's happening.
So I want to kind of steer away from trying to inundate the audience with yet another round of acronyms about ATS, AE, SSP. I mean, there's lots of different roles in that part of the org. But hearing you talk, though, I mean, obviously there's a lot of value in, let's call it a Power Lori workshop or other kinds of envisioning that you can do. And we do give our customers lots of three-letter acronyms that are sort of floating out there. Yes. VDW, Value Discovery Workshop, CIE, Customer Immersion Experience, so on and so forth.
Yes.
So if a customer wants to get to that highest and best place, the Power Lori Workshop, other than saying, I need Lori Gowin to, what are the kinds of things based on what industry they're in that they should be asking their account team for to help them with that envisioning cycle?
So I would ask for them to be transparent. A lot of times you'll have businesses, there's one that I've worked with where one side of the business is doing one thing and another one is doing another, and they're not communicating with each other. They're very siloed. So asking whoever you're talking to at Microsoft, what are you hearing from the rest of the company, and understanding that so that you can really start to build that vision of where the entire company as a whole is going. And I would say that's from both the technical side and the business side, because sometimes the technical side is going one direction and the business side is going another, and they're not really communicating well. But the whole purpose of the account team that we give to you, both from the sales and the support side, is so that we have access to all of that and we can help share that and make it more unified across.
So just to break it down, the customer really doesn't need to then figure out which thing to ask for. They should just be transparent about what they're trying to accomplish and let you map in the best set of resources.
Right. Yeah. Because a lot of times we know that. There's been a lot of times that, we've worked with one side of the business or the other, and they're like, hey, how can we do this? Well, you've already got a part of your business that is doing this. Why don't we work y'all together and you can learn from each other, right? I've seen that happen several times, both from, the support side and from the sales side, where they know what's going on in some other area, because we do keep that information. I mean, we keep, and we have team meetings together. We collaborate internally, so that information is there, and we're willing to share it. And we do try to be as transparent as we can and open that information up to the customers, but sometimes they don't even know to ask, right?
If it's possible to export from Power BI, is it possible to export from Power Lori and share that with your customers?
It is.
Well, we absolutely love that you were powering us today, even if it's cold in Birmingham and foggy in the Redmond area. It certainly brightened our days and brightened a lot of insight into the different roles, your role in particular. But we certainly thank you for your time. Thank you for coming in. We've got a moment at the end of the show where we do frequently asked questions. We hope you'll stick around with us and share your most frequently asked question. But until then, thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Hello. So today, the IntraZone is out on the road. We're here in the Microsoft field. And we're sitting down with Chris Bortlik and Paul Summers. Chris and Paul, thanks for sitting down with us.
Thanks for having us, Chris.
Thanks for having us.
Well, it is great to be in the field for lots of reasons. Not only it's a great time to be here in the New England area because the Boston Red Sox won the pennant last night, speaking of fields. So sorry for that, Paul.
It's all right.
So can I ask you, gentlemen, to introduce yourselves?
Sure. My name is Chris Bortlik, architect here at the Microsoft Technology Center in Boston. Been with Microsoft about 10 years.
I'm Paul Summers. I'm also a technical architect here at the MTC, and I've also been with Microsoft for about 10 years.
So what came first, Microsoft or the technology?
For me, it was a little bit of both. So my background was actually as a Microsoft customer. Spent 14 years as a customer before joining Microsoft. I actually worked with Chris at John Hancock, and we had the privilege of owning the SharePoint environment for all of the United States.
It was small detail. What was the job title of the principal administrator of our SharePoint environment?
He may have been the CIO.
Yeah, it was like you'd see permission requests getting routed all the way up through the org chart, and he wouldn't give it up. He just loved it.
He loved the tech.
Yep.
I joined Microsoft through the Fast acquisition in 2008, so I focused on enterprise search for quite a long time, and then I went into MCS, and then I joined the MTC about 3.5 years ago.
So one thing I think we should do is we should also slow down a little bit for our audience, because we traffic in our 3 and 4 letter acronyms all the time. So you mentioned MCS. Could you tell folks what that is?
Yes, MCS is Microsoft Consulting Services. So I served as a solution architect, helping customers deploy and configure our Microsoft solutions out in the field.
So we're here. We're actually in the Northeast Microsoft Technology Center, MTC, Burlington, Massachusetts. Talk to me a little bit about what your day-to-day role is. There's probably no 2 days that are the same.
Yeah, so at the MTC, we do a number of things. We'll certainly do one-to-many engagements and workshops, but really our core focus day-to-day is working with customers. So typically we'll do a number of what we call engagements. Strategy briefing is a bit of us talking with the customer about our vision, our strategy, our roadmap, and aligning it with the customer's goals and objectives. We often do design sessions, which is more technical, where we'll start to solution and whiteboard. And that often leads to doing things like a proof of concept, or more and more we're doing hacks and hackathons, where we're actually taking business challenges and hacking on them with our technology to help the customer see how the Microsoft technologies could apply to, again, their use case, their scenarios, and their personas.
And I'll just add that one of the most important things, or one of the best things about the MTC, is our customer focus and our customer obsession. Really thinking about the customer problem first, and then taking in the technology to address that.
So if you think back over the last 10 years or so, I remember an MTC then was a place where you went in, every hardware vendor was trying to make sure that they had their stuff, racked and stacked so they could point to it if a customer came through and said, brand X is certified on Microsoft. How has the whole cloud transition and Azure transition over the past 10 years shifted what you do?
That's a great question. So we actually still have our data center that's here, and more and more of the hardware that's in there really isn't being used. We certainly have Azure Stack, and we do still have customers on premises. But we're actually in the process of repurposing that data center, because most of our day-to-day resources that we use at the MTC are in Azure or Office 365 or Dynamics. So it's been really interesting. A big part of our job is helping customers to kind of transform, and we really find that they're in 3 buckets usually. There's the customers that are looking for the business case and the value. There's the customers focused on the infrastructure and the plumbing to get going. And then there's really those customers that are transforming, that have made the move to the cloud and are now trying to embrace more advanced services like Power Apps and Flow and cognitive services in Azure.
Yeah, and one of the key functions of our role is to, keep on top of it. We're innovating so quickly at Microsoft, so how do we continue to learn about the services being delivered and bring that value to our customers as well?
So, one thing I've always thought was interesting about the MTC is you have a wealth of resources that some customers take advantage of, and some customers may not be aware that they're out there for them to be able to tap into. What are some of the surprises customers have when they come to an MTC?
One of the cool things is we have what we call our Exploratorium, and we have 57 MTCs worldwide. We have over 15 in the United States. So each one is unique in terms of the geography and the locale. In Seattle, as you know, they have the Seahawks and the Seahawks jersey, which as Patriots fans, I like to remind them of that Super Bowl. One of the things that I find that is interesting to customers is the ability for them to get immersed in the technology. So every MTC has what's called the Envisioning Center, which is a theater environment where we can go through personas in a role-based kind of day in the life scenario. But we also have what we call the Exploratorium or Innovation Alley. And as you look around the Exploratorium, you'll notice we have solutions that are built for different industries. So healthcare is big here in Boston, so we have a whole experience built around healthcare. But we also have things around IoT and artificial intelligence that customers can come in and think about Microsoft differently than the company that supported and built Windows and Office. Our portfolio has evolved much more beyond the traditional workloads that Microsoft had.
Yeah, and I think on top of that is our focus on security, right? So not only are we not just Windows and Office anymore, but we're really putting security first. And I think as the customers come in here and we work with them, they're really impressed by what we're offering these days.
How much of the mix is stuff that we already know that we're going to present on? And how much of it is reactive and responsive to what a customer's needs are day to day?
Yeah, it's a great question. So part of our process, we go through what we call a qualification process. So any customer can request an MTC engagement with their account team, and our director will go through and look at it because we're a limited number of resources. So we'll have to make sure we're being allocated like consultants to the appropriate opportunities and customers. But once we do that, we'll go through an internal call with our account team to make sure we're aligned on goals and objectives. But we always spend at least 30 minutes with the customer ahead of time, understanding their environments, their goals and objectives, their audience. And while we may have some standard things that are on the menu, if you would, and some ideas, we always want to start every engagement with a mutual, we call discovery process. Asking the customer about their current state, asking what their goals and objectives. And we want to make sure that the entire day, or in some cases multiple days, are focused on the customer's goals and outcomes, not just Microsoft's goal, and that we're aligning at the end with, we call it kind of a plan, a path ahead to help the customer actually realize not just a pretty whiteboard, but actually an actionable plan to help them move forward.
Yeah, and I always say we're only constrained by time and the resources, so as long as that preparation gets us the right resources in the room to address those customer outcomes and objectives, then we're happy to be very flexible in terms of how we deliver our sessions and our engagements.
So you mentioned that there's a theater here. Is that so? Are there performances? Is it musical? Help our audience understand. Help them envision the Envisioning Center.
Yeah, so it is sort of a theater. It's a room with 4 sets here in Boston or in Burlington, Massachusetts. We have a mobile set, an office set, a home set, and what we call a vertical set. And our goal in that room is to show that day in the life experience. What is it like to actually live with the Microsoft technology, and how is it transforming the way you work? We use it for a lot of purposes, but the key in there is that it's not a theater in the sense that we're not talking a script. We're trying to demonstrate the technology in a way that is relevant and relevant to what the customer is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and really, we'll spend usually maybe an hour to an hour and a half in that room. And to Paul's point, we'll have ideas on these modules of things we think might be interesting. But based on the customer conversation, we'll maybe show different things. We try to break it down into maybe 10 or 15 minute scenes, if you would, where, yes, we have an environment, but it's all live running software. There's no clickable prototypes. There's no mock-ups. It's all live running, commercially available software that the customer can walk out and leverage if they want to.
It really generates awesome conversation, and typically customers walk out of that room sort of with their eyes open to what they can do, and then we figure out, what we're going to do after that.
Yeah, we'll often say when we're doing these strategy sessions, the morning's all about the art of the possible, where we're hopefully expanding the customer's vision of what Microsoft can do and maybe tailoring it by their industry, whether they're retail or healthcare. And then the afternoon, and especially the design sessions, we like to make it the art of the practical. So what's relevant for a customer? Where are they at in that 3-stage kind of cloud adoption journey? And how do we help them to actually move forward, whether it's clearing blockers or concerns around security and governance, whether it's helping them think about modernizing, how do we help them think about migration either with Microsoft or with our partners? So it's a huge part of our process.
So MTCs are, definitely, the front line for Microsoft, coming from Redmond, as I've discovered over the past couple of years, it's a little harder to kind of get in front of customers when you're based in Redmond. And it's great to have these centers here, but not just for customers, you're also embedded here in the community. What's some of the interaction that an MTC has with its local community?
We do lots of programs in the community. A lot of it focused around educational groups, sponsoring and supporting hackathons both here, also going out to the community. We often host, just this week, I hosted a group of graduate students from one of the local universities, and we really showed them, what Microsoft is doing to enable this digital transformation that a lot of companies are going through.
Yeah, and we sponsor a lot of the user groups. So last night, the Office 365 user group was there. Tomorrow, we'll all be at SharePoint Saturday speaking and delivering sessions. Boston, I think, was one of the first few back many, many years ago that actually got onto the SharePoint Saturday train, if you would. We now have expanded to SharePoint Saturday New England to encompass the entire geography. So we do a lot with, as Paul mentioned, nonprofits, with schools, as well as with our developer community, our customer community, our partner community. And we do a lot of actually having partners host and sponsor their events using our facility to meet with our mutual customers.
So, you mentioned there's 15 MTCs around the country. So customers shouldn't feel hamstrung because they can't necessarily come to Redmond. How's it been? I mean, I know that, each of you have had roles where you're, when I say out in the field, literally out in the field. How much time do you spend here in the MTC?
I'd say probably most of our time. So we are facility-based, as we like to say. We will go on-site occasionally to a customer. But one of the differences with this role that I've had for about 3 years compared to my prior role at Microsoft, which was 7 years, actually as a technical professional going on-site to customers, is most of our engagements here are a full day to multiple days. We love to get the customer on site to the MTC for a few reasons. One is they get to see some of the latest technology that's available. We have the Envisioning Center. We also have each of our briefing suites has things like the Surface Hub in our room where we can bring in and we can whiteboard. We can bring in their remote associates through there. So we spend, again, probably at least 90% of our time, I'd say, actually at the MTC. We'll certainly do online meetings and, again, occasionally go on site to a customer or we'll go speak at an event or a conference. But probably most of our time, Paul, is about 90% you'd say here?
Yep, absolutely.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much for sitting down. Of course, it'll be great. By the time this airs, we will have gotten through yet another successful SharePoint Saturday New England. So thanks for your support of that.
Go Red Sox, go Patriots.
So if folks want to get in touch with you, what are the best ways to follow up?
So I'm on Twitter. You can follow me at cbortlik. It's CBORTLIK. I'm also active on LinkedIn.
I'm similarly active on LinkedIn. I'm Twitter at PJ Summers JR.
Great. We'll be sure to put those in the show notes. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
I recently attended SharePoint Saturday New England in Burlington, Massachusetts at the Microsoft Technology Centers. I sat down with a few of our longtime partners, including Mark Anderson of Simpraxis Consulting and Ryan Thomas at Timlin Enterprises.
Here, have a seat.
Thanks. So
Step into my office.
So today, the Intrazone is sitting down with Mark Anderson, MVP and principal of Simpraxis Consulting.
Yes, that all sounds about right.
And
nice to see you, Chris.
And so today we're at SharePoint Saturday New England.
Right.
And you're one of the organizers of the event.
Sure.
How long have you been involved with SharePoint Saturdays?
Oh, well, let's see. I mean, I guess it goes back to probably SharePoint Saturday Boston 2010, 9 or 10. So the reason I remember it is it was my first speaking gig outside of like my living room. So I remembered talking. I had a session on data view web parts, and I felt like it was the worst thing I had ever done. It was just like I was sweating and shaking. And that said, SharePoint Saturdays are an excellent place to start speaking.
Where can the audience find out more about you and about Simpraxis?
Well, you could read my blog at simpmark.com.
I do read your blog.
SYMPMARC. You read my blog.
Yes.
We really got to get you a better hobby. And our company website is simpraxisconsulting.com.
Yep.
You can find stuff that Julie Turner and I are up to there.
Great.
So, and Twitter, simpmark.
That's
pretty much everywhere. Yeah, simple simpmark.
That's great. So we'll definitely put that in the show notes for people who need to keep tabs on where you'll be speaking and writing. And thanks again.
That would be awesome. Thanks so much.
We're here now with Ryan Thomas, President and CEO of Timlin Enterprises. Welcome.
Hey, thank you very much, Chris. Good to see you.
So we're here actually at the Timlin booth, and you folks are sponsoring, one of the sponsors here of SharePoint Saturday New England. How long have you been engaged with the community here?
Quite a while, since hope what I think is the very first SharePoint Saturday. I believe I was here as an attendee or possibly doing InfoPath form presentation back in the day when I was more of a developer.
Yep. And so, from your perspective, what brings you here to SharePoint Saturday as a sponsor? What are the connections you're hoping to be able to make?
Yeah, so I probably have somewhat of a different reason than a lot of other people combined with their reason. So first of all, it's a business reason, right? I have my own company and I'm trying to have brand awareness.
Yep.
But I'm probably one of the few people that also was part of the community, have been part of the community since I started as a developer working on these tools a long time ago, right? So since 2006. So there's a lot of these people that I just know and have a lot of fond kind of memories of, and it's really great to catch up with them and sort of talk shop, see what's going on from both the perspective of the classic sort of guy doing the work versus the business trying to sell the work.
So, we've spoken a lot on the show about how the technology has changed over the years. I'd love to get your perspective on how the community has changed, even if just here at the local community. What have you seen?
Interesting. That's a good question. I think I've seen some people shake out of the community, and I think I see a lot of really good diehards that have stuck with it, and I guess I'm one of those people. There are a lot of people that when SharePoint switched from an on-prem push to a cloud push, there a lot of changes were made. A lot of people took different career paths. We were one of the folks that thought that we should hang in there, and that these tools would, once the infrastructure work was complete, the demand would be back in there for digital transformation services to help people use these tools as they've changed and will continue to change. And I'm glad to see a lot of faces have stuck around, and they're doing well.
Yeah. So what are the kinds of things that when you talk to both folks here as well as your own customers, what are some of the things that you're able to bring forward through Timlin to kind of help solve some of those challenges? You mentioned the cloud, the leap to cloud.
Sure, yeah. What our primary business these days is less about moving people there and more about helping them use the tools properly now that they are there.
Yep.
Since we're not infrastructure experts, we get involved after the customer has adopted the platform to a certain extent. They're using email, they're using document storage, but now they know that there's more out there, and digital transformation is important to them. But digital transformation isn't really a project, right? And intranet is a project. That may be part of digital transformation, but digital transformation is an ongoing set of activities that occur to use the tools better. So we believe in this sort of ongoing process of being engaged with the users on a consistent basis, supporting them. We call it sort of giving users Lego blocks when they need them, and so that 3 or 4 years from now they can build a castle. Right now they might be able to just build a little car, but that's what digital transformation is. It's the slow process, the slow burn by which our customers learn how to use these tools better. And by customers, I don't mean IT. I mean the business users. Those are the people that your business needs to push forward.
I do think that the nature of the community has shifted. There's much more of a business dialogue and business attendance at events like this about how can you. The challenge isn't how do I roll out SharePoint, but how do I solve a problem or how do I establish a culture?
That's a really good point. So I'm glad you brought that up because the development kind of dried up a little bit for a while.
Yeah.
Right. It was the sessions were a lot about how do you write code, right? How do you build server-side solutions, and it's much more about governance and user adoption and the transformation, how to use these tools properly.
Yep.
There's still a lot of technology there, though. But you're right. Our business has shifted much more from the hardcore technical folks to more strategists, but that's just the current roadmap. I believe there's 3 stages to this. There's infrastructure, right? Initial migration. Then there's business analysis, setup, vision, road mapping, IA work. Of course, that's going to constantly evolve because the roadmap will be changing. Microsoft's releasing new software at a rapid pace. But then what I think is coming around the corner is kind of the old days to a certain extent. With Azure apps, with Power Apps, with Flow, starting to get better than some of the commercially available tools.
Yep.
I'd see the development and the real customization starting to dig back in the next 12 to 18 months.
One of the things that we're, at Microsoft, we're also really focused on is how do we take the newest development framework, SharePoint framework, and get it extended throughout more of Office 365 into Teams and being able to create a better deployment surface for what those solutions need to be. Yeah, I think you're probably right. So how can our listeners find out more about Timlin and about you?
Well, that would be great. So my name's Ryan Thomas. I've been a sort of a SharePoint aficionado, now Office 365 aficionado for quite a while now. You can come to our website, timlinenterprises.com. You could, hit us up, call us, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. But happy to talk to anybody about these tools, love them. And our model's a little bit different than a lot of people. We really look at things as an ongoing service model as opposed to just a go in and get it done and leave project. So I encourage anybody who's interested in kind of that ongoing support effort to help really move these tools along, just give us a call and talk to us about it.
Great. we'll make sure we'll get those in the show notes. But thanks a lot for talking to us, Ryan.
All right, thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. All right, that
Thanks.
was awesome.
Chris, when you were hanging out with Chris Bortlik and Paul Summers, did you have any really frequently asked questions that are very current?
One question I do get asked a lot about is, how do I find the Microsoft Technology Centers in my region? Because we have lots of offices around the world. I think it's either 662 or 1,400. It's just a massive number of facilities. But just because you see a Microsoft logo on a building doesn't mean that that's the Microsoft Technology Center for the area. There's about 35 in North America and a similar number around the rest of the world. And there's a website where you can find what the closest one is to you and all the services that offers. We'll be sure to put that in the show notes.
Yeah, the MTC is a great, great resource. And if it's anywhere close to you, it's worth the drive, whatever that drive might be. The most frequently asked question I've gotten recently that's within this topic is, how can I request fast-track assistance for SharePoint onboarding and adoption support? And usually, I have to be frank, this is prompted when I talk to customers and I suggest to them, you might want to work with Fast Track.
That's a great question. How can you request Fast Track Assistant?
First, you got to know if you're eligible. Really, essentially, if you're an Office 365 customer and of mid to enterprise size, which is not as big as you might think, you can certainly go and request Fast Track support through the Office 365 Admin Center. We'll put a little bit of how-to in there, but basically, you're going to be clicking on a button that says Need Help. And it'll route you through the request assistance to go through that form and to request exactly what you're asking assistance for. And if you work with a partner, it works the same. That request will go through your partner, and then they'll know what it is that you want to talk about next. So basically, you go to the Fast Track site. Once you're signed in, you can see our offerings specific to SharePoint, data migration, adoption assistance. But then there's a lot in terms of if you want your Active Directory in better shape, if you want to onboard Exchange, if you want help in use and adoption and rolling out Microsoft Teams, ton of stuff there, including one thing that Chris mentioned a little bit earlier called the Productivity Library. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes that is actually a filtered link on all of the SharePoint offerings. But you should know when you go to the Productivity Library, it's really focused around scenarios. So the question around how can you get fast track assistance, the answer is just reach out. Ton of resources. Once you get plugged in and you have that request being fulfilled, that could be assistance online or assistance in person with an actual architect to help you with what you're looking for help for. Lori, what is your most frequently asked question these days?
So my most frequently asked question right now has been, how do I insert whatever custom data source in Power BI? And you can insert whichever one you want, but that's always been my most frequently asked question in the last, I'd say, 6 months. Everybody's like, how can we get it to connect to XYZ? And the answer is the easiest way to get that conversation started is to go to ideas.powerbi.com and search for that particular data source and see if somebody else has suggested it. And if they have, vote it up and get all your friends to vote it up because the product group notices that and they will start looking at that and see it and maybe put that in their roadmap. And if it's not there, make that suggestion and then go get all your friends to start voting for it as well, because that's the easiest way to get that started in front of the product group.
And my totally quick follow-up, about off the top of your head, how many sources of data would we support at this point in time before somebody might need to vote it up or build their custom one?
The last count that I had was a little over 80 plus. So I think about 85. Some just came out, so in the last 2 weeks. So I'm not quite sure. There may be some added ones there, but the last time I tried to count number by number, about 85. But then we also have generic ones like ODBC, XML, anything like that. So if it can connect to using one of those sources, we can usually do that as well.
All right. So
that's great.
We got a good number and always keep it growing by voting it up. So Chris, you get a lot of questions these days. What's your most frequently asked question?
Well, the one that I've been hearing a lot about is kind of related to how customers can work with the Microsoft field. And it really comes back to how partners can ally with us out in the field. It's always like, we go live in location X and that's where our business is. How do we get connected into the Microsoft field? And one of the best bits of advice that I have is we're distributed and people are working from home and in all sorts of regions and industries, but pay close attention to where we have located a Microsoft Technology Center, MTC, another 3-letter acronym. because those tend to be good centers of gravity where there are lots of TSPs and account executives and people coming in for envisioning centers and customer immersion experiences and all kinds of other things and workshops. And it's a good center of gravity. And the more that you are connected there, it's an easy way to get connected to our customers as well. So let me ask you, Mark, what's a question you've been hearing?
Yeah, in this area, recently I've been doing a little bit more customer evidence, so working a lot with the field as we always do, but with a different take on it to actually hear what the customer stories are and then see if we can get a case study out of them, whether that's written, video, something that we use in a keynote or something we put out on the web. And always one of the follow-up questions from customers, and this is now more frequent because I'm on my third or fourth one in the last bit of time, and the customer's always asking, beyond what it is that they want that we're wanting to do during this process, is can I talk to another customer? I'd like to ask questions of another customer, not only who has done evidence, but who is also trying to do X or Y, build out their intranet, build out some Power Apps, working with Power BI, whatever the case might be. And they always love talking to Microsoft. They always love talking to partners, but they also love talking business to other customers. And as part of our agreement, when people do case studies, typically if they sign the generic agreement, is that willingness to talk to other customers. So the advice or the answer that I give is absolutely. All you need to do is request it. Request it through your account team. The account team has access to a tool or can easily find somebody who has access to the same tool that just looks and says, which customers have we done evidence with? Which ones have signed that they're willing to talk to other customers? And of course, what have they been talked about or what are they doing? So they have this set of data that's a really nice set of data to ask that question. Can I ask another customer about X?
Right.
It's a really great tool, really easy thing to ask the account team to do. And it's really something that anybody at Microsoft is willing to help with.
Yeah, I think that's really one of the best ways that people can learn is to learn from each other and to learn from an actual real-world pattern as opposed to, not that Contoso doesn't break new ground in all sorts of things, but it is that real-world customer experience we think that's the best vehicle for education.
Paul, what's your frequently asked question?
So we're getting a lot of, and this will be near and dear to your hearts, a lot of questions about how we are moving into the cloud with customizations inside of SharePoint. It's a really great story. We're able to talk about the new extensibility model and the connectivity, between all the different extensibility surfaces, whether you're talking Teams or the Office client or SharePoint. We had a conversation yesterday with one of our Azure architects about a customer saying they can't move something to SharePoint or to SharePoint Online. And I sort of challenged that to say, let's dig into this because, most of the solutions that people have deployed on-prem, there is a model to bring them into the cloud.
Yeah, I actually build on the migration story. So one of the things I've been seeing a lot with customers is we have some folks that are still on SharePoint 2010 and they're considering what to do as that's going end of life and out of extended support soon. And the big question that a lot of them have had is not just how do we migrate the technology, the applications, but what's the information architecture? What's the governance look like? Should we do a quote unquote lift and shift and try to migrate things? And I'll often use the house analogy of, when I bought my first house, I had a lot of rooms and things in my garage. And when I bought my second house, my wife challenged me to say, do you really need to take those shirts, those things in the garage that you haven't used in 5 years? So getting customers to try to think about, look, when we built things in SharePoint 2010, there was a set of solutions available. As we're moving into SharePoint Online, there were new things in the house that didn't exist. Communication sites, things we're doing, Power Apps and Flow. So really helping customers to think about how do we migrate? What do we migrate? Do we delete things? Do we purge things? Do we archive? So don't just focus on the technical, actually focus on the end user experience.
When we talk internally about how do we deal with the sales possibilities that are out there, who's our competition for SharePoint as Office 365? It's really SharePoint 2010. That legacy farm there is the biggest thing that we're trying to displace. But I also have a lot of fun at conferences when someone comes up and will ask me, yeah, I think we have SharePoint. I don't know, it's SharePoint 2010. Has anything changed? It's like, oh, this is going to be fun.
Yeah, and then we'll start talking about what did you do with it? You're using the fabulous 40 templates where you're trying to do things where you're trying to build media server on premises. Right. So it expands beyond just what can SharePoint do, but what can the rest of Office 365 do? How does Stream come in? How does Yammer come in? How does Power Apps and Flow? Because back in 2010, and we had the big wheel, and remember Steve Ballmer on stage around SharePoint conference, they say, the answer is SharePoint, what's the question? And we still certainly love SharePoint, but it brought in so much of the core capabilities into the rest of Microsoft 365 and even into some of the Azure platform services as SharePoint continues to invest more in enterprise content management, web content management, and then leverage the strengths of the rest of Microsoft.
It's time for an Audible demo. This segment is our new segment called Try This. After hearing this, we want you to go try it. It's really just an Audible tour across a scenario of something that you can do with SharePoint and Office 365 today. So try this. You're in SharePoint and you either have already created a page or you want to create a new news article. At any time, you can have a page converted and promoted as a news article. And we'll talk about what happens in just a second. So creating a new page, add all the elements that you want. Imagine the things that you can't do in an email. Section layout, formatting, the types of different web parts that you can add to the page so that you have the text that you want, images, documents, videos, even Power BI charts, knowing that when somebody comes to that, it's always going to be as up-to-date as you need that news article to be. Once you've laid it out, if you change your mind, you can always rearrange some things. You can even add metadata to the page, so if you want to organize better, even after you send, you might have a place where people come to read all of your news organized in a certain way. And you can also send it through a review and approval process if you need somebody to give it the okay before you publish it. Now, here's where the rubber really hits the road. When you publish the news article, it's actually going to go out into your intranet in the way that you prescribe. If you want it to be just team news, very targeted, you can do that. Publish it in the right place. If you want to go out beyond your team, then publish it in a different place, but also know that it's going to go to end users, your people, to their SharePoint mobile app. They'll get a notification. It's going to go to their web in SharePoint Home in the aggregated news at the top. You can even have it automatically start conversations in Microsoft Teams, because every time you publish a news article, it can start a new conversation thread in Microsoft Teams. Now that you've got their news article out there, or you've created your page and you want to now convert it to news, promote it as a news article, and everything we just talked about automatically happens on your behalf, and the word gets out there. And now, like I mentioned, I didn't forget to put somebody on the to line. If somebody new joins the team, they'll just get that because they're a member, and they'll be able to have access to that news article. And all is good. Your information is out there, and if you need to update it at any time, you can update a news article or a page, and it'll be updated for the next person that comes to it. Different than an email that may have been something that was sent a number of days or weeks ago and is now out of date. That's our new Try This segment, so go try it. The article of the week this week actually harkens back to our very first episode where we focused on the intranet. We've made a lot of progress, shipped a lot of features, and of course have written a lot of documentation to help you move not just your mindset, but your actual sites from classic to modern. And in the cloud, we think now the modern offers a lot of tools, a lot of technology to equate what you may have done in the past on the classic publishing infrastructure. So the article of this week is a new page that we put together that we hope is self-descriptive. It's called Build Your Modern Intranet on SharePoint in Office 365. And when you go to this page, from top to bottom, you'll see an overview that basically gives you a 101 of the art of the possible. Then there's some customer examples highlighting one of our customers, Wavemaker, with a video, but there's also 13 other stories of customers that have built their modern intranet on SharePoint in Office 365. And then below that is the real meat, where the team that's been pulling together and writing a lot of new documentation around branding, around navigation, around theming, around just information architecture, search, and navigation. There's a whole cluster of really, really nice new articles about how to build your intranet in Office 365 in a way that matches what you're trying to accomplish, but also hopefully highlights some of the things you didn't know that you could do in the cloud with SharePoint in Office 365. And then at the very bottom, there's some relevant blogs and videos that will keep up to date. So anytime you hit this page, think of it as a great resource page to think and learn, what can I do today in Office 365 to move my intranet either from classic in the cloud or classic on premises all the way into a new modern experience that's great on the web, great in mobile, and easy to maintain over time. To get to this article, go to aka.ms/SharePoint-build-modern-intranet. We'll put a link in the show notes. Visit the page. Tell us what you think. You may be itching to go a little bit deeper than this podcast or the recent blog that you've read. To go deeper, you can always plug into an upcoming event to keep up with what's going on. We always encourage you to think in terms of a SharePoint Saturday that might be near you. They're free, easy to find out what's coming up next at spsevents.org and see if there is one in your neighborhood or worth a drive or maybe a short flight.
Yeah, as you know, we sort of get cooped up in the 6 weeks leading up to Ignite, and then there's this burst that comes out like, we're back.
So coming up shortly after this episode goes live, November 17th, there is a SharePoint Saturday in Ahmedabad, which is in western India, in Calgary, Alberta, and in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And then the following Saturday, November 24th, there is a SharePoint Saturday, Casablanca, Morocco. Gosh, there's lots that we could go off on that one. That sounds like a fun one. Oslo, Sweden, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and wanted to let everybody know that I'll actually be giving the keynote for the Toronto SPS event. So really excited to plug in with Conwal Kippel and his crew, and certainly going up into Canada and seeing if my passport will get me in and out.
I am curious to see if the event in Casablanca, they'll be rounding up all the usual suspects.
Something tells me it won't be hard to get speakers to go to that one.
Shortly after that, about 20 of us from here in Redmond, along with some of our colleagues across the different Microsoft technology units in Europe, will be converging on Copenhagen for SharePoint Europe. We've spoken to Tracy in prior broadcasts, and this is the chance for us to share the latest and greatest from Ignite and beyond, November 26th to 29th in Denmark.
But wait, there's more. In the year 2018, December 2nd to the 7th, in Orlando, Florida, there is the Office and SharePoint Live event. This is a 3-day event with workshops, breakout sessions, and it's co-located with a lot of other technology like Visual Studio, SQL Server. So there's a lot of tech that you can plug into, SharePoint, of course, and beyond. And that's chaired by our friend Matt McDermott, who's got a ton of speakers, and it should be a great event, especially if you're in the Florida area.
And continuing our global tour, SharePoint Fest Chicago, December 3rd through 7th. 3 days of conference, 2 days of workshop days. I'll be there. Mark will be there.
Yeah.
Lots of sessions. I'm doing a keynote. And for the first time ever, we're going to be recording a fully live session of the Intrazone.
Oh, yeah. Live and unedited. Thank you to our guests, Chris Bortlik and Paul Summers from Microsoft's Boston MTC, and Lori Gowin, who joined us from Alabama, and our partners at SharePoint Saturday New England.
We encourage you to check out our show page for links to all of what we discussed today and more. Visit aka.ms/theintrazone.
If you have questions, thoughts, SharePoint stories to share, you can reach us via email at theintrazone@microsoft.com or via Twitter at SharePoint, at mcashman, and at cmcnulty2000.
Remember to rate, review, and tell all your friends about the show. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you so much for listening. We are your hosts, Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty. This has been The Intrazone, a show about the SharePoint Intelligent Intranet.